Hello and welcome to Fight News Now Extra. I am John Pollock and we are getting you caught up on all of today's headlines, and then stick around as we discuss them with John Ramdeen and Robin Black. In the news today, a potentially expensive drug test failure, the UFC preparing for the worst with Mark Hunt, and the UFC makes their Toronto return official. On UFC Tonight, it was announced that UFC 165 will emanate from the Air Canada Centre in Toronto on September the 21st, with tickets going on sale later this summer. The UFC had previously announced they will run Toronto every September, and that began with UFC 152 last year. Ariel Helwani reported on UFC Tonight Tuesday that heavyweight Roy Nelson has been asked by the UFC to apply for a license in Nevada in the event that Mark Hunt cannot get out of New Zealand, where he currently remains. Hunt was arrested in 2002, and that arrest has popped up with Hunt being grounded after a number of attempts to fly to the U.S. for his May 25th bout with Junior Dos Santos. And Pat Healy may have smoked the most expensive joint in the history of fighting. Healy failed his post-fight drug test following UFC 159 with marijuana showing up in his system. Not only will his win over Jim Miller be turned to a no contest by the New Jersey State Athletic Control Board, but the UFC now also has the right to withhold his submission and fight of the night bonuses, which totaled $135,000 along with his fight purse. And we are here with John Ramdeen and Robin Black for our monthly chat about marijuana usage within mixed martial arts. This time, Pat Healy getting popped here. So his win over Jim Miller, easily the biggest win of his career, now a no contest, and $135,000 in bonuses that night, which the UFC does not pay out until your drug test comes back. This one absolutely... feel terrible for the guy, but
I don't.
Who doesn't know the rules by now?
Listen, you have to know the rules. This is the biggest fight of his entire career. He says he was hurting for cash. He says he was hurting for cash back in the Strikeforce days. You know the UFC is going to test you. Again, it's the biggest fight of his career, and look what happens. 90% of the money that he made taken away. I understand what you're saying.
This is life-changing money.
Yeah, it's life-changing money, and I get what you're saying. You feel bad for the guy, but you know the rules going in. So if you get caught, there's only one person to blame. That's yourself.
Yeah, sure. Maybe that's true, but when we weigh it, look at this. The guy smoked a joint,
I agree.
And it cost him $130,000.
Every time this turns into a referendum, this is the rule. We can address changing the rule all we want.
Do that.
It's a stupid
not
rule.
when a guy
I agree.
gets popped.
Yes, I agree.
That's the rule right now. People, whether it's fair or not, that is what is written, and you know it going in.
Let's accept it. That's the rule, and the guy broke it, and that's wrong, and he made a mistake. Let's accept that. Let's move on to, do we think this rule is appropriate?
Yeah, we know
Does it make any sense? Let's have that conversation.
Absolutely not. It makes absolutely no sense to say that a guy smokes a joint and is going to be somehow impervious to pain and that he's going to perform better or whatever the case may be. It absolutely makes no sense. It's just like, there's no comparison. People say it's a performance enhancer, like some sort of steroid. No, it is not.
No, anybody who's ever smoked pot can't even do up their shoes sometimes, you know? Sometimes you get a phone call from your mom and like, oh my God, my mom is calling. Like, I don't know what to say to her. Like, you can't do stuff. Not only that, these guys aren't getting popped because they smoked pot that day. They're getting, this is costing him $130,000 because he smoked pot last week. Yeah. It's not in his system. There's some metabolite
Robin,
that remains.
At the other side of things, like, how ridiculous does this sound? Yes, this is an extreme example of how much it cost a guy. But you have a joint 3 weeks out, and there's the chance this could screw up everything I'm working towards. Is this worth it?
Yeah, I agree in that sense that no, it absolutely is not worth it. And you know, I mean, I've heard it from UFC fighters that say, 30 days is the window. I can smoke weed up until 30 days before my fight. And for anybody, even that 30 days, I'd be so concerned that I would lose money, that they would test me and something would happen. So again, I understand what you're saying, that Pat Healy is the victim of this because, yes, it's a stupid rule.
And Healy did the right thing. He apologized. I mean, he apologized to the fans. He apologized to the UFC. What's his wife going to say?
Yeah.
Like, you know what, like, man, the biggest win of your career, just an unbelievable performance, like a life-changing performance.
That's not going to change anything. The people still saw, that's the thing about this, is that people still saw his performance. People saw that this guy came forward against Jim Miller and put away one of the top 10 guys. That is not going to change anything. And as a matter of fact, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be excited, especially with this whole weed stuff surrounding Pat Healy going into his next fight.
Is it possible now that because this is so absurd that this actually causes further debate about whether or not this makes sense.
Well, some fighters have. I mean, Matthew Riddle said he is going to go to Nevada and petition for this to be changed because everyone knows how ridiculous this is.
Yeah, sure.
Matt Riddle's the guy we need.
That's the guy.
Get Matt Riddle on that.
He's gonna smoke a couple of bowls and say, "I'm doing this like today, man," and then 2 years later, he still hasn't done it.
Well, maybe Legacy FC, not the best platform to initiate any change, but nonetheless, let's quickly get into some other news topics because last week I pretty much blew this off that Mark Hunt would be in any jeopardy of making it to Vegas. He's still in New Zealand, and now the UFC, as Ariel Helwani reports, getting Roy Nelson ready just in case they need someone for next weekend, and especially during his final week of hard training. For Mark Hunt, this has got to be a gigantic distraction of not even knowing if you're going to get off of the continent.
Yeah. Okay, first of all, for Junior Dos Santos, this is not a distraction at all because they're the same guy. Like whether you fight Mark Hunt or you fight Roy Nelson.
And you fought Mark Hunt before.
Yeah, you're fighting this, and you fought both those guys, and you got to be scared of that huge overhead right. So for him, it's not. But for Mark Hunt, man, this guy's fought all his way up for this important fight, and he's dealing with something that happened in 2002. He probably smoked pot in 2002 and got dinged for it. I mean, it's just silly.
As long as he didn't 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I don't think Mark Hunt's concerned at all about this. The guy's got so many fights under his belt. I'm sure he's made a couple of dollars when he was with K1.
Hope so.
This is just a situation that the UFC has to deal with. It's something that I'm sure wasn't even in the back of his mind when it happened. So I'm sure the UFC will get this dealt with. If not, there's a great alternative in Roy Nelson.
I guess.
All right, and finally, UFC returning to Toronto. Predict the main event right now, John Ramdeen. What is going to be headlining September 21st?
I think it all depends. Maybe Luke Rockhold versus Anderson Silva. No, when is the fight supposed to happen? When is that card? Toronto card?
September.
Maybe.
It's doable.
Who knows? It's doable.
Okay, first of all, Chris Weidman is going to beat Anderson
Silva. Okay, so it'll be Luke Rockhold versus Chris Weidman.
Man, and put Pat Healy on the card, man. This guy needs some money, and I'd love to see Pat Healy in Toronto.
Maybe he can visit a medicinal marijuana dispensary.
You just go and hang out with Ramdeen.
Jarvis and Wellesley. All right, Fight News Now Extra continues. Don't go anywhere.